Welcome to the Roots of the LMHE podcast, to amplify the voices of Louisiana's music community and cultural leaders while exploring how heritage, creativity, and economic equity intersect. I am Monique Pyle, the Senior Director of the LMHE, and today, as my guest, I have Mr. Don Marshall, Director of the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival and Foundation. Welcome.
Thank you. So glad to be here.
So glad you're here. And let me start off with saying, I know that there will never be enough time to get all the information that you have and that you can give us. So I'm going to put it on record here. We're going to do this probably again in the future.
Good.
So with that being said, Mr. Marshall, you are a Louisiana, New Orleans native.
Yes.
Born and raised. Your family owned a business here.
Correct. So I got involved early with the arts. Mm-hmm. My parents had both the Dixie Art Supplies, which was a major art supply company in the city, and also the Downtown Gallery, where contemporary art gallery in the French Quarter in the 60s. So I kind of grew up among artists, primarily visual artists, learning about famous artists like George Deroe and Ida Kohlmeyer, and then actually running the family business, waiting on them and helping them supply select colors and stuff like that. So I've really grown up in a a unique environment, not only in the visual arts, but as a preteen, when Preservation Hall first opened, we would go down every Sunday and hear the bands there and interact with the bands. So I developed an early love of music, as well as in theater and other art forms here. So I feel very lucky, to been born in New Orleans, and then to be raised in a family that was so involved with all the arts in the city, which is really our biggest asset for New Orleans.
Absolutely. Now, being around, those different arts, did you ever, play an instrument? Did you ever sing? Did you ever dance? Did you ever do,
No.
paint?
It's interesting. I mean, I'm often asked that question, and it's sort of funny because I grew up in a business environment, business of the arts. So I learned how to run businesses. I learned how to do budgets. I learned how to interact with staff and everything. So I don't have the focus or the talent. You don't want to hear me play a musical instrument or sing or paint or anything like that. But I love being with artists and hearing what they have to say and supporting, what they do and everything. So I'm really the business person of the arts and everything.
And they need it.
It's definitely needed. And there are a lot of people in this community who do that.
Yes.
I mean, we're very fortunate. I know just with my work, at the Jazz and Heritage Foundation and the Contemporary Arts Center and Le Petit Theater, we have so many talented people on the business side of the arts that is so important to sort of stimulating and keeping our arts alive.
So really quick, before we start going on, I just want to name a couple of things that you have been involved in. So when you reference it, we all know. So you left New Orleans just for a brief bit and you went to college.
Correct.
Graduated, returned. Your first job was you had a Jazz Fest booth for the art.
For basically the crafts community. I immediately got involved with the Louisiana Craft Association and stuff. And so we created a booth at Jazz Fest and sort of displayed all the other artists throughout the state there and everything. So that was my first actual participatory part of Jazz Fest.
And that was the first Jazz Fest also?
That was the third one. At the fairgrounds.
Okay. And then you started a Mardi Gras crew. It was first called?
Crew of Clones. When I was the first director of the Contemporary Arts Center back in the 70s. Contemporary Arts Center this year is celebrating its 50th anniversary and stuff. So back in the 70s, there was a real sort of growth of the arts in New Orleans, particularly sort of like 1975 to 1985. And you had a lot of young artists, who had come back to New Orleans from college, musicians who were coming here. And running the Contemporary Arts Center, a 4-story deserted warehouse building, we were able to sort of like any artist who wanted to do anything could come in and we'd say, sure, let's do it. Go up to the second floor. You've got a dance studio. Go up here, theater space, the whole thing. So it was a very vibrant time in the arts in New Orleans. And I was very pleased to be part of that and to sort of, because of my knowledge of all the different disciplines and everything, be able to, program music and program visual art exhibitions and theater and stuff like that. So that was a good start, of really being heavily involved. And, being an executive director of a major arts organization, in my 30s, early 30s and stuff was pretty unusual. So I felt very lucky to have, been able to do that.
Absolutely. You've also been the executive director of the La Petite Theater.
Correct. I had a wonderful experience there. After 9 years of running the Contemporary Arts Center, I felt I needed a change. And La Petite Theater is a real treasure in this city. It's, I think, one of the oldest theater companies in the United States. And they were going through some difficult times and everything, a lot of changes and losing their audience and stuff. So I went over there, recreated a lot of things. We brought back the children's theater, which was very popular with, we had theater actors like Becky Allen and Ricky and stuff. So it was nice to bring that back and sort of rejuvenate the theater itself. And in a year and a half, we became the largest subscription-based performing arts organization in the city. So we were able to sort of financially turn it around by doing the best professional productions and really enjoyed that time there.
That's amazing. Yeah. You also co-founded the Tennessee Williams and New Orleans Literary Festival and the New Orleans Film Festival.
Right. I was fortunate to travel to basically New York and San Francisco, in the 70s and everything, and sort of saw what was going on in other cities. And I've always felt, well, if, New York can do this, if San Francisco can do this, we can do it here. And, Tennessee Williams is such a giant part of New Orleans history. And so when I went to La Petite, the first production that we did was Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. So I thought, okay, well, this is a perfect opportunity to create a festival. So I contacted a bunch of people on the theater side, and we were doing, planning to do a festival. And then actually a good friend, Peggy Scott Laborde, who does, WIS television, was working with a group for a literary festival. So we decided to join forces and just kicked off this wonderful festival that continues to grow. And so that was fun. And then, of course, looking at back then in the 80s, New Orleans was becoming, and Louisiana was becoming more of a film center. A lot of productions were happening because of tax incentives and things like that. And so good friend Andy Horton, who was a professor at Loyola Film, and I got together and was like, well, why don't we just start a film festival? So we started a film festival with no money, a lot of participation from different people in the industry and everything, but it started off with like doing movies at the Joy Theater of, swamp horror shows and things like that. But I'm a big believer of sort of planting the seed, getting it done, getting it publicized, and then the next year it grows and the following year it grows and stuff. So I've been fortunate to work with some great people in, creating things that, continue to grow here.
Yeah, and they're all still around and they're all still growing.
Thrive.
So thank you, because they are such a huge part of our community.
Yes.
And I love them all. Is there a moment, an event, or experience that made you realize how special the New Orleans music community is?
I would say probably because of the intensity of my job, getting the job of executive director at the Jazz and Heritage Festival and Foundation. Jazz Fest had gone through a really, really rough time financially, right before Katrina. And, financial losses, there was a real question of whether or not the festival would continue. A lot of inside fighting, a search for a new producer, all these major companies coming in to talk to my board, about producing Jazz Fest. And that was an interesting experience. And, we finally came to the logical conclusion and the right conclusion of continuing the relationship with Quint Davis and Festival Productions. I mean, Quint is one of the most amazing, people I know and the greatest supporter of New Orleans and music and culture. And what was great about getting the job at that time is I had recently been director of the Arts Administration graduate program at UNO and taught multiple classes. And one of my classes was a festival class. And so I, as a project for my class, I gave them the opportunity to develop and design a festival. And I threw out some festival ideas that I'd been working on and everything. One was a blues festival, a Cajun Zydeco festival, a Congo Square festival. And so the students, developed their plans, and it was a lot of fun working with them as they learned how to really think about something and make it happen. And so when I, came into the Jazz and Heritage Foundation, my plan was, okay, I want to create these festivals. And lo and behold, we had my first Jazz Fest festival right before Katrina. And it was a huge success, a really great sort of a revitalization of the festival with AEG Live being one of the partners. And then lo and behold, a few months later, we have Katrina. And then all of the Katrina of, the festival staff being displaced and everybody being displaced. And could you have a festival in New Orleans? And cities from Atlanta to Houston offering to host a Jazz Fest. But the amazing team pulled it back together. And I was able to start working on additional festivals. The foundation really didn't produce festivals on its own on a regular basis. So there was a lot of money available from outside and inside New Orleans to support musicians and the arts. And so we first did a Fiesta Latina, celebrating the New Orleans, Latin music community. Then we did a blues festival, which is the Crescent City Blues and Barbecue Festival, which has grown to a really good size, and then on and on. So I was able to actually produce and create festivals because I wanted to support the New Orleans musicians. So I think at that point, that was the time that most excited me about actually being able to do something for the music community. And I think those festivals were really important to bringing the musicians back to New Orleans and showing the world that our musicians were still here and, creating other opportunities for them to perform.
Right. And do you think that those festivals had played a major part in preserving and sharing the stories behind Louisiana's musical heritage?
Definitely. I think it's similar to what Funk Fest does in such a great way, and also the new museum of sort of celebrating and putting the spotlight. Constantly people are amazed at how many blues musicians we have in Louisiana and New Orleans, and great blues musicians who are nationally recognized. I mean, you look at, Samantha Fish now and Tab Benoit, and all of our great blues musicians are nationally recognized. And it's wonderful to have an event every October where people from around the world come for this festival because they're in love with New Orleans and its music. And I think that's what's so important about, these festivals like Funk Fest, that it brings in to the city the people who from around the world who love our music. And at the same time, it stimulates, new sort of things in the music. I mean, I was amazed this year with Funk Fest, which is such a fantastic festival with like the Meters 2.0, it's not only presenting, but it's sort of rejuvenating, an art form and everything. So you see new combinations of musicians creating new work. And I think that's really important for New Orleans music, is not just to live in the past,
Right.
but to do new things. And that's why I'm a big believer of being able to present musicians, pay them properly, and really present them to the world.
Where do you see gaps in how our cultural history is currently?
I don't really see any, major gaps as far as, knowledge and promotion and representation. I'm just concerned that we have such a large creative community here. Visual arts, musicians, theater artists, actors, that there needs to be more financial support for them. I believe very strongly that we need to be doing, the nonprofit organizations need to be doing more music concerts. And I know that that's part of the plan of the museum, is to have a sound stage where musicians on a regular basis are presented in a professional environment and well paid. And I think that's really important, that we need to focus over the next couple of years of expanding the number of well-paid performances in a great environment, so that musicians aren't having to survive off of, being paid $100 to perform at a bar or something like that.
Right. And that's one of the huge challenges. And that's one of the reasons that LMHE is out here. And how do you think the Louisiana Music and Heritage Experience is different from a traditional museum in terms of supporting living artists and not just celebrating the past?
Well, I think, Chris Berry, who is amazing. We are so fortunate to have him here. there are very few people who love the music as much as he does. I mean, it was fun watching at Funk Fest him dancing and celebrating and having such a great time. Mm-hmm. And I mean, the whole thing, all of the things that he did during Katrina with, Funky Uncle, and then, Mardi Gras parades, but constantly, showcasing our great talent. And I think, the museum with its great exhibits, which are really important for, promoting and letting people know about the rich, past, but also the current situation with musicians, is really important to, have that available, so that when people come into town to enjoy the music, they also get the history of it and they get a deeper understanding of it. I mean, few people really recognize how great the R&B scene was, in the city. I mean, with Fats Domino and, of course, Irma Thomas and Alan Toussaint. I felt very fortunate growing up in high school where, all of our dances, if we had Irma Thomas or, Deacon John, that was the best thing that could happen. So, exposing these artists to audiences, the ones that know them, but also to new audiences, is really important and develops new support.
Mm-hmm. What would it mean to the community if musicians had a year-round opportunities and not just seasonal gigs?
Well, I think that's the ultimate goal in everything. I mean, we really have to, because there's so many great musicians here who don't have the opportunities to perform as much as they should be performing. And again, I think with the museum and if some of the other cultural institutions step up, even things like, the New Orleans Museum of Art having music, or the Ogden, all of that really is important, that they're presenting the New Orleans musicians and paying them. And we just need to triple it, because, I mean, the numbers of musicians that, constantly come to this city, I'm overwhelmed and fascinated with the number of musicians who come from other countries who are here, sort of, because their love of New Orleans, the attraction of New Orleans music and our culture. And, they're revitalizing the music in their own way and stuff, and learning and doing new things. So again, I think it's important, and I think the city needs to recognize it, the state needs to recognize it, that we need to provide more financial support, for the musicians and stuff. And it was interesting after Katrina, a couple of organizations got together and created a gig fund so that musicians were paid to perform after Katrina and everything. And something like that may be needed again.
Yeah. I mean, I think that one of the things that, started this whole thing was the Funky Uncle.
Yes.
And that was during COVID, and that was the way to get musicians money. And then look what sparked from that.
Gosh.
So
It's phenomenal. I mean, I can't say enough about how impressive it's been to sort of watch Chris, with the Funky Uncle, and just, I was going back and looking at some of the videos of the performances and stuff. And, it was amazing, the groups that performed, who could not perform anywhere else. Mm-hmm. And then the 3-year evolution of Funk Fest the past Funk Fest was phenomenal. I mean, it catapulted, that festival into being a major festival, along with French Quarter Fest and Jazz Fest. That the plaza was a great location. The layout was great. The place was packed. People were loving it, dancing, and they came from all around the world and country.
And coming from Mr. Festival himself, that means a lot.
It needs to be recognized. It needs to be recognized.
It was unbelievable.
Yeah.
What excites you the most about using the LMHE as a platform to advocate for economic fairness in the music industry?
Well, it's a good point. I think that having something as substantial as a museum, and so people tend to value things more when they're in a museum. It's sort of like you have a stamp of approval. And so, and then it's also a place where people come together and can learn and love about our music. So I think it's sort of like an advocacy role of making people aware of just how important it is to the city and this country that, the museum exists and really brings people together. I'm sure there'll be constant lectures. I love the fact that there's going to be a sound stage with performances so that those people, not only people living here, but coming from out of town, can go and hear live music. And there's a huge audience for that now.
Absolutely.
We did at the Jazz and Heritage Foundation, we would do about 30 concerts a year in the wonderful George and Joyce Wein Center, and presenting the musicians in a really great auditorium with great sound and great, technical backup, and then of course having WWOZ record it. It was always packed.
Yeah.
So there is an audience here for going to a really good concert of New Orleans music, in addition to festivals.
Right, and I think that being able to pay them a living wage and doing that, and bringing people to them,
it's very important. I mean, I think we need to also just sort of think of our different music groups as communities.
Yes.
And bringing the music community together, bringing the visual arts community together, and really sort of discussing ideas and issues, and becoming advocates for certain things. I think there's a lot of power in politics if you form these large communities that speak out for different issues and everything. And I think there's certain things. I mean, certainly affordable housing is a big issue here and everywhere. We need more affordable live-work spaces. I mean, we have a couple great complexes here that have, studio space and living space for artists and musicians. We need more.
Right.
We need to make affordable housing a major issue of how do we come together, and then deal with healthcare issues. Thank God we have a musicians clinic.
Yes.
That really does amazing work for helping musicians with everybody has healthcare needs and everything, and that needs to be better funded and grow and expanded to all the arts and everything.
Yeah, and I think once we are able to pay people what they deserve, then everything else hopefully will fall in around it.
Yes, that's first and foremost.
Yes. How do you think the Louisiana Music and Heritage Experience will impact tourism and year-round visitation?
I think it would be huge. I think knowing, just watching the whole development of it and the plans for it and the state-of-the-art concepts for the exhibitions and all the activities and stuff, it's going to be a world-class museum. And, it will enhance anybody, even if you weren't coming to New Orleans for the music, you'll go to the museum. And I just think that branding New Orleans music, letting people around the world know that we're here and we're thriving, and I think it's going to have a huge impact on bringing tourists to New Orleans. Where they realize that this is one of the main reasons I'm going. There's so many other reasons, of course, but I think this will have a major impact.
And how do you think that will support the nearby small businesses, artists, and neighborhoods economically?
It'll have a tremendous impact. Again, between the exhibitions, the lectures, and the performances, you're bringing people to a location. So that will impact the restaurants around there, the coffee shops, and the hotels, and the small businesses and everything. So I think, having a major institution like this in the city will definitely, not only impact the city in general, but that particular neighborhood.
And in all your work that you've done, because it's the arts, it's music, it's culture, it's all of that, what makes you want to support the LMHE personally?
Well, I think just its importance. I mean, it's the best thing on the future horizon, for this city. And it's got all the right components to it. And I think that, it would be, the city will grow and, become even better. I'm very excited about a lot of the new directions that are happening in this city and the professionalism in its management and governance. I think that, New Orleans will become a brighter spot for visitors. And a museum like this will be recognized, internationally and everything. I mean, right now we have one of the great museums of the world, the World War II Museum, which is considered, I've seen studies where it's in the top 10 with the Louvre and, being one of the greatest museums in the world. And I think this museum will definitely, join those ranks.
And how do you think, with all your festival work, so you have the Jazz Festival, which covers a huge ground of different genres of music. And then you kind of started little, I don't want to say smaller ones because they're not small, but they're smaller than the Jazz Fest.
Right.
So the Barbecues and Blues, and then, the Cajun Zydeco one. And so doing all of those little festivals and then being able to go to the museum.
Right. I think that, they kind of go hand in hand.
Right.
I mean, I would hope that everybody coming in for French Quarter Fest and Jazz Fest would go to the museum, because, and they will, because, they're usually here for some extra time, and having a real deep experience about the music that they just heard or that they came here, to hear, will be very beneficial. So I think there's a real partnership between, the museum and all the festivals that happen. And, hopefully that will also allow some of the smaller festivals to grow.
Right. And you did touch on it before that a lot of people aren't aware of certain genres of music here in Louisiana. They think immediately, Cajun or jazz or whatever. But when you go across the board and you think of all of the musicians all over Louisiana and the different genres and what started here and how this was pretty much the epicenter of, you know,
all of it.
All of it.
Right. We like music here. There's no place on the planet that celebrates. You know, it's just phenomenal every Sunday to see, you know, a second line and, you know, the street scene that happens of all the people coming out of their houses and they're on the streets and they're partying and they're, you know, there's the barbecue people and there's the, you know, the beer people. And then you have all these young people dancing and the dance moves are phenomenal. I mean, we have our own style here of sort of dancing to the second lines and everything. I was watching a couple of videos, you know, every Sunday you have a new video of the, you know, massive numbers of people out, people dancing in the streets, brass bands and everything. And it's just in our blood. I mean, you grow up here and, you know, I'm a big proponent for, you know, arts education, particularly music education. Luckily at the Jazz and Heritage Foundation, we had the Heritage School of Music and served about 250 students with free music education. We have about 12 nonprofit organizations that have after-school programs. And they're teaching kids to love music. Some of them will, you know, actually continue and become musicians, but most of them won't, you know, but they'll have this background and love for music and connections. I mean, I've always loved talking to friends who, you know, may have been in the band at Booker T. Washington or something. They still get together as friends on a regular basis and everything. So again, it's building this this creative community that I think is unique and again, sort of gives a reason for the museum to celebrate it. And I think with this past Funk Fest, the whole focus on the Black masking Indians, that was phenomenal.
Yes.
I mean, the whole thing at Loyola, where you had, I think it was 5 different chiefs.
5 Mardi Gras,
talking and then performing. And really, then the tent at the Funk Fest and everything. Jazz Fest does a lot of that also with the performances, you know, the parades and its different exhibitions and stuff. But that was an amazing experience just to be part of that and to walk into that tent at Funk Fest and hear the calls and hear the performance, see the performances and stuff. So, I mean, the museum covers a lot, you know, and I think it's all about the way we celebrate here in the city.
Right. And I don't think a lot of people understood how amazing that was to get 5 black masking Indians chiefs together and to perform and to do that whole weekend. I mean, it was just beautiful.
It really was beautiful. It really was beautiful and stuff. And also just to put that street art basically into the context of an educational institution and a festival and everything, bring it to a different audience that may not go to the second lines or may not on Mardi Gras Day get out to, you know, different neighborhoods and see it in person. So again, we have a lot to celebrate in this city. And we just need to keep moving ahead and doing that and supporting our artists and musicians better.
Yes. In one sentence or word, what economic and cultural impact do you believe the Louisiana Music Heritage Experience will have on New Orleans?
I have to say it's twofold. One is the economic impact on our musicians and, you know, sort of building the better support, the desire to see the performances, learn about the history. So, I mean, number one, it's what it's going to do for the musicians. And number two would be really what it's going to be doing for our own community of, you know, celebrating what we do well here. I mean, there are a lot of people in New Orleans who have never been to a second line and, you know, don't go to Jazz Fest and everything. So I think making all of our culture more interwoven into the entire community will strengthen us. I mean, this is the most creative community in the country. I mean, one of my favorite things is having been involved with the Crew of Clones, which was really the first alternative Mardi Gras crew of crazed people, dancing in the streets back in the late 70s, right. Early 80s.
Which is now the Crew.
Crew de Vue, right. And people love the Crew de Vue.
Yeah.
Back then, there was none of that. Mm-hmm. And then, you started to see the emergence of the women's marching groups, the Pussyfooters and all the Bearded Oysters and all these great names and everything, and, before Katrina, there were like 5 of them. They're now 140. Mm-hmm. And it's so fantastic to see anybody can participate. Right. It can be the person who from the bank or who is from the coffee shop or whatever, your best friend. And they're in costume and they're prancing and parading. And a lot of them have dance routines now. And it's sort of like, you can be a creative person even though you're not a musician or a visual artist or an actor. But the everyday person in New Orleans can be part of the creative community. And again, you don't have that anywhere else.
No.
And so it's nice that that's the common thread that goes through New Orleans. Even your bankers do it,
Yeah.
So it's phenomenal. We are so lucky, and we just have to financially keep it going.
Yes. You never feel out of place.
No.
Let's put it that way.
Everybody fits in here.
Everybody fits in here. Yeah. Absolutely. Why is now the right time for a world-class Louisiana music experience?
Well, I think, the New Orleans culture has grown to a major point, particularly the music community. I think we have, again, we've talked about it, so many musicians here. And the visual arts community is phenomenal. It's under-recognized here. I've sort of started off doing a lot of things with the visual arts community at the Contemporary Arts Center, curating shows. And just recently, I curated a show at the Contemporary Arts Center called Refreshing America. That was 85 New Orleans artists who were immigrants. So these are artists who have just sort of in the last 5, 10, 20, whatever years have moved to New Orleans. And we have I would say we have 400 or more professional artists who are trying to make a living in the visual arts. That's a gigantic number. And those artists are not getting the support that they need. So I'm hoping to continue to do large-scale exhibitions to expose a lot of our great artists to new audiences and all that. But I think it's time that we have to do something, to stabilize this and to make it grow because, we're headed into some interesting financial times. And that's going to impact our creative community and everything. So we don't have as many sponsors, for festivals locally. We have some great ones, but we don't have the family foundations that we used to have here that support, the museum or the symphony or the opera or some of the major institutions and stuff. So I think the museum can help stimulate a pride in being more supportive for all of the arts.
What does the Louisiana Music and Heritage Experience mean to New Orleans, and more importantly, to you personally?
Well, for me personally, I'm just so excited about the different, exhibits that recognize, our great musicians, and particularly the ones that I've experienced. The Fats Domino exhibit was overdue. He is one of the world's great musicians, and sort of, yes, we recognize him kind of, sort of, and people are forgetting about him, but the exhibit sort of brought to life so much in depth of what he accomplished. I mean, it was phenomenal what he did at that time in our country's history and everything. And Clifton Chenier, and I mean, the exhibits themselves educate us all, and sort of give us a deeper appreciation for the work of these artists and the artists who are continuing to do that type of genre music and everything. So I think that's, for me, the greatest thing of, the exhibitions have been wonderful. I can't wait to see the dynamic new exhibitions and the new technology that will be used in it. You'll be able to experience the music and see and hear and maybe even participate. But it elevates music to another level, in the.
And in one sentence, again, or word,
I kind of ramble on.
No, or many words.
Many words.
What impact do you believe the LMHE will have on the future of Louisiana culture?
A tremendous impact. I mean, I recently you see where some of the exhibitions that have been created currently are traveling to other Louisiana cities.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be an important part of, the museum, of creating different exhibitions that can go to Lafayette and Lake Charles and Baton Rouge and Shreveport and Alexandria and different parts of the city, to reach out to, the people living there who may not get into New Orleans. But it also may stimulate them coming to New Orleans to see things and everything. So I think that's really one of the main functions of the museum, of having these sort of traveling exhibits. I mean, potentially they can go to other states, other cities and everything. So I think that's going to be a really important part of promoting New Orleans and New Orleans music.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the Fats Domino one is now in Monroe.
Believe so, or Lake Charles. I think it's going to Lake Charles.
It is, afterwards.
It's a fabulous exhibit.
Right. But yeah, I mean, that's one of the great things that we'll be putting out there is these amazing, exhibits to teach people. Well, like I said, there's never enough time, especially for a gentleman with all of your education and knowledge and love for New Orleans. So hopefully we can do this again. But I want to thank you from the bottom of the Louisiana Music and Heritage Experiences heart for coming in and talking with us, for being somebody who's been a huge supporter and fan, and and doing all you have done in the community and the music community and the art community and the cultural community of Louisiana.
Well, thank you for having me. This has been a great experience. And again, I'm just in awe of all the wonderful things that, the museum and the festival will be doing. I look forward to participating and experiencing all the great things that are going to happen.
Yeah, it's very exciting.
Yes, it is. Very.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
If you'd like to learn more, please visit lmhe.org. Follow us on social media. On Instagram, we're at LMHE NOLA, or on YouTube at LMHE_live.